I'm Kathy Torhan from One in Christ Church in Ambridge.
Excellent. Thanks so much. How about Carrie? Are you able to unmute yourself?
I'm Carrie Dowdy from East Butler Presbyterian Church, an elder there.
Excellent.
Carrie is also certified to receive a call as one of our candidates.
Excellent. Congratulations. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How about Del G3? Are you able to unmute yourself?
Jeff Curtis. And he's muted, working on the unmute, I think. Jeff is the covenant pastor at, oh, there he is. I'll let you introduce yourself there, Jeff. I don't have to do it for you.
All right. Jeff Curtis at Highland Church in Slippery Rock.
Excellent. Thank you. And I see you there, Andrew. Your screen.
Yeah, so Andy Smothers at Glade Run Church in Valencia.
Great to see you. And do we have anyone else there with you, Tom?
Barb is manning the recording, but it's me. Yeah, so everyone, thanks for your willingness to come and be a part of this. This is a part of a series that are encouraging churches to flourish. Ministry team is creating several different opportunities to think about worship over these months. And one of the things that I know is always an awkward conversation, but an important one and a life-giving one in the church is to talk about money. At the same time, there can always be some awkwardness to how do we really think about that? Are people going to feel offended or feel uncomfortable bringing that up? And so the hope from encouraging churches to flourish was to say, who can we come in to use as a resource to help us think about conversations of generosity rather than just ignoring or not thinking about the ways that we give as a part of our life as the body of Christ. So luckily, we have a ministry resource officer, the official name, MRO, Ellie Johns Kelley, who is a guru with all things stewardship and a wonderful resource to our presbytery, as well as the presbyteries of the Synod of the Trinity. So we are grateful for her ability to come and help lead some conversation, help to inspire some ideas, to help answer some questions. How do we begin to think and talk about the role of giving as a part of our life as the church? So Ellie, I think we're intending to gather for the hour. Thank you for being here. We're really grateful to have you and for resourcing Beaver-Butler Presbytery in this way. We're going to record this conversation and put it on YouTube for others to be able, or the Beaver-Butler YouTube channel for others to be able to watch and be a part of. So if they're not available for noon today, they can still gather or still enjoy this information. So let me open us in a prayer, and then Ellie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Excellent. And do I have capacity to share too, my screen?
Oh, well, let's make you co-host.
Excellent.
I'm going to need Barb to do that. She probably can hear me. And if that's needed, she can take me off as a host.
You're done. You're done. You're good.
Awesome.
Okay, good. Well, let me pray for us, and we'll go ahead and begin. Lord, you talk about giving Your word to us shares with us your gift of love and of grace. And even as it comes to money, you have some words for us as well. Help us to be bold as stewards of generosity, stewards of the gifts that are given to your church for the upbuilding of your mission and your ministry in the places that we serve. Bless these leaders with thanksgiving for their time and energy and attention today to thinking about how to better their congregation in leadership and our opportunities to worship you. Thank you for Ellie and for her gifts that she can share with us in the ways that we connect and partner with each other as the church. Be with us during this break in the day, but an opportunity to resource and grow your church as we pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
All
Thank
right.
you all for being here today and being part of this. Are you able to see my screen easily? Is it showing up for you? I'm working off a 2 screen, so just to make sure you're able to see it. So our topic today is worshiping generously, telling stories of mission and ministry. And I'm not clicking on the right button. I had this whole piece set up, so my slides look a little wonky, that my picture was to be embedded as a cameo so you could see me like directly. And I don't know how to use that technology yet, so I will perfect it for another. So there's big space here because the cameo is just not showing up. But when we think about stewardship, it's really about theology. It's about mission and ministry, and it really stems not from us, but out of God's great generosity. Offering, creating us in God's image, calling us good, never giving up on us. Through both the Old and New Testament, we see God redeeming God's people again and again. When we turn away, when we just don't get it, God doesn't give up on us, right? The great assurance is that in life and death, we belong to God. And when we give back to the church with our time, with our talent, with our resources, we're not doing so as a transaction to get something, but we're doing so in response to what God has already done. So I'd love to hear from those gathered on the screen. How many of you get excited talking about stewardship or generosity? Anyone? You can raise your hand or nod. Good. So Tom and Jeff at least. Okay. How many of you, when you talk about stewardship, do you kind of cringe? Yeah. And I think it's how it's been used through the years and also the lack of frequency. Bill Enright, who is probably about 86 years old, he's a retired pastor, but he is as relevant today as he was 25 years ago. He just knows stewardship. He was the first executive director of the Executive Certificate in Religious Fundraising. He's a brilliant fellow, right? He wrote a great book called Kitchen Table Giving, but Bill points to the fact that if preachers only talk about stewardship once a year, preach one stewardship sermon a year, then, our eyes blink on and it's, what do we see? Dollar signs, right? But if we consistently talk about stewardship, knowing that stewardship, it's not about money, it's about mission and ministry, right? And if we think about how do we tell the story? So if any of you ever have me come and preach on stewardship and planned giving in your church, I will bust out singing in the middle of the sermon. And it's one of my favorite hymns that was in the red hymnal. So I was born in 74. I used that one with the Celtic cross. You know what I'm talking about? If you didn't grow up Presbyterian, which 52% of Presbyterians didn't, you might not know that old red hymnal. But then there was the blue hymnal, and some churches bought it and some churches didn't because it got rid of a lot of good old hymns. Why? Because there were a lot of hymns written between the 1950s and 1990, and pew racks are only so thick, right? But the denomination came out with a new hymnal back in 2012. It's the Glory to God hymnal, right? And with that, they figured out how to get around the depth of the pew rack. They used really thin paper. So they were able to bring marvelous new hymns in and even bring back some of those oldies but goodies, like I Love to Tell the Story. Do you know it? I love to tell the story of unseen things above, of Jesus and his glory, of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story because I know 'tis true. It satisfies my longing as nothing else can do. And you can hear that chorus in your head that follows, right? So I have to admit, I am a preacher's kid, and I grew up with a dad who hated preaching stewardship, right? And it goes back to his childhood. And it goes back to the fact that they only miss church one Sunday a year. It just happened, Stewardship Sunday was the time that the leaves were in their peak in Western PA. So they would not go to church in Bellevue, north side of Pittsburgh. They would drive to Bedford to go look at the leaves. And that sort of family culture bred into my dad's understanding of stewardship. And he hated preaching stewardship because he was so afraid of people feeling guilted into giving, where they were living just from trying to get ends to meet, right? That they might forego their medication or feeding their kids adequately so they can give to the church. What my dad didn't get, and unfortunately it meant our congregations lived with so much scarcity rather than trusting in God's abundance. And I would say to my dad after the fact, and I was doing this work, think about it just as telling the story. If we're telling the story about mission and ministry and inviting people to support the church with their time, talent, and resource, then that is really something that we can receive and isn't so hard. And it's actually what we believe in. And we know through statistical analysis done by Giving USA, Americans are most generous to religious institutions on the corner. We're talking houses of worship, not hospitals, not seminaries or colleges affiliated, but actual houses of worship on the corner. The largest portion of the pie of charitable dollars goes to religious institutions. And we also know people give to what they believe in. But often, folks are giving maybe what they were given 20 years ago, or they're giving at a very modest level, a pizza a week, right? $20 a week, rather than giving at a personally meaningful level. And I love that term because it means no one can tell you what's personally meaningful. You can only discern it for yourself. But what we really want to help people think about is that generosity, it's not about money. It's about mission and ministry and how we're inviting folks to engage their time, talent, and resources, all three, at a personally meaningful level. I'm not clicking well here. We have a few ministers here on today. For the preacher, we want you to be the storyteller, to excite and energize people about what the church is doing, and to preach about generosity at least once a month. Don't do it that one Sunday a year, because again, people will just see your taller signs. But if you do it regularly, then they hear it's about the mission and ministry you're trying to celebrate. We may have some commission ruling elders who are hearing this. I encourage you to think about that as well. It's so important. And for the elder and just someone who might not be serving on session right now, but may never have even been ordained, but is a lay leader in the church, what's so important is share your stories with session. What do you see happening? What are stories they might want to say? Yeah, we should lift that up in worship. Claim the privilege that during the worship hour, we can really articulate what's going on in the life of the church, and be invitational to others. We want folks who are willing to tell their story of why do you support this ministry? Can you do that in 90 seconds to 2 minutes, as part of worship, or maybe as a brief video that's for some churches might be shown in worship, might be used in social media, might be linked to an e-newsletter, or you might still have the good old-fashioned printed newsletter, a story that's written up that can be put in there. As a lay leader, if you could write a brief story of why you love the church, how do you see it making an impact in the community and the world? Encourage consistent preaching on generosity, and encourage liturgy from the call to worship. Even the prayer of confession can incorporate elements of generosity, and using hymns. If you have the Glory to God hymnal, just look in the back under stewardship or dedication and stewardship, and you will see that hymns 688 through 717 are related to that topic. If you don't have the Glory to God hymnal, look in the one you have and see by topics what hymns, and take a look at those hymns. Are those tunes, are those good words? Do they fit your theology? Pay attention to that and incorporate those, not just during your appeal time, if you actually do an appeal, but think about it year round. How are we really talking about our ministry year round in ways that communicates what we're doing? We hope everyone's reading the bulletin, and we hope people are reading the newsletter. But the reality is, golly, my last church, we had a congregational meeting scheduled, and our music director was out of town, not at our staff meeting, but we talked about it actually 2 Sundays prior to and the Sunday of the congregational meeting, and he was so mad at me because he didn't know about it. And it was an oversight on my part, but it was also printed, and I assumed that he was reading it in the bulletin and listening to me in worship because he was up in worship those Sundays. He just didn't hear it, right? So we have to think about the many ways we talk about what's going on in our mission and ministry. Can your session articulate a vision and mission for your church? So your vision statement is kind of like, out there, our northern guiding star. If we're being faithful disciples of Christ, this is what we're achieving. And your mission is kind of how you get there, right? You're not going to get there in totality, but your ultimate goal, can you articulate that? Typically, people will contribute to what they believe in, and when they know that the session can articulate, why are we here? Is it just about worship on Sunday? And even if it is just about worship on Sunday, what does that mean as children of God? Why do we find that important, right? So being able to connect the stories to the mission and vision is so important as well. When we talk about story, big question is, what is your story, right? Ask fellow elders, fellow church members, what gives you joy when you think about ABC Presbyterian Church, right? What do you see that we're doing internally, but out in the world in mission that makes you say, yes, this is why I am active and engaged in this community of faith, and this is why I want to support it. What is it that your congregation does well? In your church, in your community, in the world? Ask those questions. And then you don't have to answer them all at once. But if you can have different lay people tell stories, whether it be on that Sunday, that fifth Sunday. Do we have 2 or 3 of those a year, right? Sometimes the offering time is a time for the choir to sing or the organist to have a time to play. But what a great opportunity to enliven the offering period by telling a story and having different folks share one story of what's happening or how one person was impacted by the ministry of your church. You know, telling how are you being the hands and feet of Christ. Again, it's not about the ask. The ask is only about 5% of the work. The majority of the work, when you're thinking year-round, how do you engage in generosity and how do you do it through a worship setting, is it's consistently telling the story over and over again. Thinking about why do we tell our story? As I said, connect it. For some, they may call it a strategic plan or our vision and mission. We really want to raise awareness about the church. And like I said, remember, not everyone knows everything that's going on at your church, right? So continue to tell that story and use worship as a perfect space for doing that. Celebrate your church, create energy about what's going on, and invite people to engage. Again, asking them for their time, their talent, and resources. And if I preach for your congregation, I'll put this illustration in my sermon too. When we ask for personally meaningful, where's my fingers here? You can see all 3 of these fingers, they're all different lengths, right? And when I put them in this position, it kind of makes a stool, right? A little cattywampus stool. It's not perfect, but it's a stool that stands. So we think time, talent, resource, or resource, time, and talent. There are different times in our lives. We may have more than one over another, right? But if we're engaging all 3 at personally meaningful levels, we experience transformation, and so does our congregation as well. But when we take one of those away, say we take time away, or maybe we take resource away because we say, I only have time and talent right now. Well, even if it's a small gift and that's personally meaningful, it makes a difference because otherwise your stool falls over, right? I had a elder in a church in Latrobe tell me, Ellie, really your stool should have 4 legs. Now it's not Trinitarian anymore, but she said, my daughter was on a 3-legged stool at college and fell last week and got a concussion. I said, well, I'll give you a 4th leg real quick. If we want people to engage 4 legs for greater stability, the 4th leg would be your, I've just lost it right now. Not enthusiasm. I'm looking for an E word. It'll come to me later. But really, how do we, or not an I word? What am I talking about? Not E word. Influence, using our influence at a personally meaningful level, right? That would be the 4th leg. How do we use your time, our talent, our resource, and even our influence? You know, telling the stories of our church, not just with the folks we know in the church, but with folks we're connecting with in the community. Not that we're trying to steal members from another church, but golly, if we meet folks who are members of another church, hear about what's going on in their church life, celebrate it together, but tell the stories of the wonderful ways your congregation seeks to engage in mission and ministry. So we think about the many different ways we can tell our story. In particular, I want you to, we have all these listed here from preaching, minute for mission, during, before the offering, your newsletter, e-newsletter, brochures, town hall meetings, do a visioning Sunday at the beginning of the year, and then maybe 6 months later, have the session talk about, well, what have we achieved so far? And what do we have left that we hope to do that we haven't yet? Doing a dessert and dialogue, Sunday school, if you're still host church school, testimonials, video testimonials, narrative budget. These are all great tools to use year round, but really focusing on what are we doing during worship is preaching, I already named, doing minutes for mission. That may be separate from the offering, but you know, I would say 4 times a year, do a minute for mission just to highlight what is possible as a quick thank you for supporting this ministry. Because when you participate in the offering with your time, talent, and resource, here are some things we can do. And let me lift up one story for you, right? Really making sure that the offering is not just a solemn break in the service, but a joyful expression of what's going on in the life of your church. The testimonials and video testimonials, those are things you can incorporate in, but again, use in live streams. You might have some folks who say, I love this church, but I don't like talking in front of people. Well, could you sit down with them and put some of the words that really have meaning for the church and why they support the ministry on little cue cards? And then you could have them lift them up, whether they're standing in the lectern doing it, right? Or doing it on a video with our smartphones. Things are so much easier today than they were even 15 years ago, with coming up with some really neat videos we can share with one another. You know, every nonprofit dreams of the opportunities that we have as churches because we get to talk to our folks every week. Now, we know regular worship is moved to about twice a month, but that is far more frequent than most other nonprofits have. We get to invite, as part of the liturgy, part of the work of the people, the offering, right? We get to invite folks to participate in supporting this mission and ministry because they really believe in it. And really taking time to be attentive to the offering, to share a story during the offering, to be joyful, to be inspiring. And like I said, just not a solemn break in the service, right? We want to make it easy to give. And that's by having people can give their offering online for their monetary gifts, right? We want during the time of the offering to discuss, if you're offering online giving, there are a lot of ways you can support this ministry. Maybe you give a short little story and then say, you can give by dropping a cash or check in the offering plate, by a gift of stock. There are not many folks who probably do that, but there are some who do. And golly, it's good to know. It is to their benefit to give that stock directly to the church than to sell it to have money to give to the church, because then they have to pay capital gains. But if they give that stock directly to the church, and we at the Presbyterian Foundation are able to receive gifts of stock, there's a 2% transaction charge, just like our online giving, but we're able to receive it on behalf of the church. And then we sell it immediately and distribute it to the congregation. So, gifts of stock, qualified charitable distributions. Do you know what this is? Raise your hand if you do. Okay. Andy and Jeff do. In case others don't, whether it's here or watching later, those who are 70 and a half or older, actually 73, you have to take a required minimum distribution. But in 2013, the federal government made permanent, for as long as Congress makes anything permanent, they could always overturn it, but they made permanent that anyone who's 70 and a half or older can have a qualified distribution go from their IRA to the church for any amount up to $100,000 in a given year. It's a beautiful thing, right? So in so doing, they would get a different receipt, and I can provide you a sample of that if you want to have that. You just reach out to me. But that money goes tax-free to the church or other charity of their choice. So if someone is giving, they're modestly supporting the church, about $1,083, the average gift per member. The average gift per worshiper is about $2,400 a person, but just say it's the average in the PCUSA. They want to send $1,000 they give to the church. They will have lower taxes if they have it sent directly out of their retirement savings if they're 70 and a half or older. They don't want to do it the day before they're 70 and a half, won't count. So you'll wait till at least you're 70 and a half or 85 or 95, any age over 70 and a half. You can have a distribution go to your church, and you just call your plan administrator and say, please send such and such amount from my retirement account to ABC Presbyterian Church at this address as a qualified distribution. For those who are 73 and older, it counts toward the required minimum distribution. And what's beautiful is it doesn't affect your adjusted gross income. So that money goes out, but it's not reflected in your adjusted gross income. You don't get a charitable deduction, but it's better because you don't pay any taxes on that money. It goes tax-free to the church. And then where it can have a really positive implication for folks is that not only it may keep you in a lower tax bracket, but you have to pay a portion of your Medicare based on where you are in that bracket. And so for some folks, you know, they're already supporting the church. You know, maybe they support the church with $4,000 a year. Having it come out of their retirement savings account is really advantageous for them. And so I'd recommend that you talk about all the different ways people can give to the church. So when you're doing the offering, you know, tell a good story and then say, you can participate by cash or check in the offering plate, online bill pay, online giving, a gift of stock, a qualified charitable distribution. There are many ways. And you can figure out what's best for you. No one can tell you how to do it, but we want as a congregation to open up all those opportunities so it's easy for folks. Raise your hand. Is your church offering online giving now? I just see one. Is that right? Oh, and Concord raised their hand too. Okay. So we have a lot of churches, even after COVID, aren't offering online giving. Know that the Presbyterian Foundation has a service. We offer online giving. You don't even have to have a website. It's the least expensive program out there. And we use Vanco Payment Solutions as our platform. There's no startup. There's no recurring fee. It's only if someone makes a gift, there's a 2% charge, whether it's from their checking account, their savings account, Amex, Discover, MasterCard, Visa. Amex and Discover are typically more expensive. Doesn't matter. It's all that straight 2% fee. And if your congregation would like to know more about it, I'd be glad to do a Zoom. But I would encourage you, even if you think, oh, golly, Ellie, we're a bunch of white-haired, gray-haired, and blue-haired Presbyterians. No one's going to use it. You tell your elders they want to be ready. When their kids and their grandkids show up for Christmas and Easter, maybe that's the only time. Younger people don't carry cash or check. So being able to offer this allows them to participate in the liturgy. Otherwise, if we don't offer this, it means we're limiting who can fully participate in our liturgy. You know, we've opened up communion at this point. Shouldn't we open up the offering plate as well? So being comfortable to talk about those things and just name it. Some of our churches have online giving, but they don't talk about it. There's nothing in the bulletin to let folks know they can give online. You could put a QR code there, but also naming it, letting folks know it's available if you do have it is also a really mindful thing to do. So when you think about who should be telling the story, anyone who's doing storytelling, whether, you know, you read books on storytelling, they tell you to know your audience. The same in the church, right? And we have folks from different generations, different walks of life. So we want different folks telling their story so others can hear it with a different perspective. So really think about getting different voices over time that represent your members, your friends, and others that engage your community. The others that engage your community, easy one. Are you supporting mission outside of your church? Maybe it's PDA. golly, with all going on right now, you're probably not going to call their office this week because they are really busy. But, 6 weeks, 9 weeks from now, you could call them and say, could you give me a 90-second video? You don't even have to be here in person, but can you give me a 90-second video that we can share with our folks? It's a way of getting another voice. If there's a local organization you're supporting, maybe it's a food bank, but it's not part of your church. Is there someone there who's willing to talk about and share the story of this mission that you're supporting? Another voice to bring in to encourage folks. There are a lot of great TED Talks out there. There's this one by Nancy Duarte, The Secret Structure of Great Talks, and I'll share this PowerPoint with Tom that he can distribute to you folks. And she really talks about the structure of great talks. Goes back, she didn't frame it this way, but in speech class, we were told, tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them, right? She really goes through that and talks about lifting up what is, what can be, and then going back and forth. What is the reality? What can be? And you really have sort of a beginning, middle, and end. And at the end, you have a call to action and an invitation. So if you want to think about how's the way I tell a story well, those stories that focus in on one person's perspective, typically have greater impact. You can talk about one individual, you could talk about their family or their whole community. And what's interesting, statistically, they're showing that it's that story of the particular person that folks will really respond to. So, make sure you have permission to share folks' stories. But if you are working with a group that does mission that you're supporting, see if they have a story that you can share that is particular, that you can lift up. Other great TED Talks, you think of Simon Sinek and The Power of Why. That's another great one. And I don't have it on here, but I'll add it too so that you can click on it. Do you have any questions, thoughts, things you're wondering about? Have you, for those who aren't clergy, have you had opportunities to talk about your church's story in worship? Anyone? Or those of you who are clergy, have you gotten, so it's not just you speaking, but other church members speaking. Have you gotten other folks to talk about the church's story in worship?
Ellie,
Yeah.
it's Jamie. How are you?
Great.
Hey, I would just share, and I started doing this from Emily Lindsay from up in Erie Presbytery, but I've been doing it so long now, I can't remember when I started. It was before I came here. But our annual meeting is telling stories. And that is our agenda for our annual meeting, is a worship service in which each of the people from session, there's a written report, but they don't read the report. They get up and tell a story of God's faithfulness through their work. And it goes over really well. So I would just say sharing stories is really, really important. But if anybody wanted help with that, I'd be happy to share what I do. But it's a great way to kind of lift up what the church is doing. But it's all about our stewardship, right? So in many different ways.
And again, you just keep connecting it back to your vision and your mission. Who is God calling you to be as that particular community of faith? That's terrific. And, something you can use that's not part of the worship service is a narrative budget where you show, instead of that line item, sessions need to use the line item budget, but you really want a document that takes all of the church expenses, even building expenses, and divides them up into 3 to 5 areas. If you did 5 areas, my top ones are worship, mission, Christian education, pastoral care, and fellowship is what I did when I served a church in Warren. And golly, talking to our custodian, I said, how much of your average week do you think you put into these 5 areas? And he said, Ellie, I don't do pastoral care. And I was like, well, actually, you clean my office so it's ready when I'm doing pastoral care. Um, and this was back in the day before streaming. So we would record our services, and while our custodians were cleaning the parlor, they were burning CDs in our computer lab next door. And I was like, that's actually pastoral care. It may be a really small portion of your overall time, but we just figured out that percentage, a bit of a guesstimate. And so we allotted that portion of their salary and benefits to that, right? But then we were able to say to our folks, 44% of our annual budget goes into worship. And we were able to do the same for mission and Christian education and pastoral care and fellowship. And, when you do it well, you put lots of pictures to help tell the story. You don't separate the building out as a separate piece of the pie because the building only exists for mission and ministry, right? And sometimes folks get caught up in, oh, the staff costs us so much, whether we have a full-time pastor or we have stated supply, it costs this much of our budget. Or we can look at our building and say, oh, our building costs us so much. But really, those are there for the sake of mission and ministry. So dividing them into those areas can be really helpful as well. Other questions or thoughts? Carrie, it looks like you're trying to talk, and you're muted.
Well, I'm actually sitting outside with our cat. That's how it hears.
Lovely.
Well, it's very distracting. But while I'm talking, what were the 5 breakdowns that you had? I couldn't write it fast enough.
Yeah, no problem. So when I did it for my church, we did worship, Christian education, or worship, mission, Christian education, fellowship, and pastoral care. And if you go, you may not know, we have a wonderful program called stewardshipnavigator.com. Any of you not hear about that before? Raise your hand. Okay, Carrie, at least you're new. So if you go to www.stewardshipnavigator.com, you can put in you're in East Butler. So just put in Butler, I think. You don't have to have your church pin or anything. Just put in Butler, PA, and it'll populate all the churches in Butler. If yours doesn't show up, put it East Butler then. But you pick your church and then you create your own username and password. And there are resources for year-round stewardship. And actually, what I might do is stop sharing so I can share Stewardship Navigator with you. Let me do that real quick. And I would encourage you folks to think about like your narrative budget, and Stewardship Navigator has a template for you to create a narrative budget, which is just wonderful. And let me share again. So you can click on sign up. It takes you to this page. So again, we'll see real quick if East Butler shows up. Yep, there you are. So you just click on that, and then you're going to create your own username and password. And as many people at your church can sign up for this as you like. There's no limit, but we do ask that each person create their own username and password. I'm going to
Ellie, can you share that? Because we're not seeing it.
Oh, I thought I did hit share. Sorry about that. Let me show that again.
Yeah.
Okay, are you seeing it now? Thanks for telling me.
Yep.
So yeah, you just go in here and I put in Butler, PA. So you don't have to worry about church name or pin. I just put the least amount of information, but you can see all the churches in Butler showed up. So you just choose East Butler is what Carrie would do. And she can create her own username, put in her name, last name, her email address, and a password, and then confirm it. And it's going to create her own login. I'm going to log in as myself. And you won't see this page. This is just for MROs. But let's see, do I have any churches from your Presbytery?
Glade Run, Valencia is right there.
Yep. It's because I was showing it to them. It was lit up. Thank you. So here's Glade Run Valencia's page. You can see there's a stewardship calendar, and it gives you things to do every 2 months, segments, from your generosity storytelling to education to what, if you have a committee, or maybe you just have one member of session who's kind of leading the effort. But there are details and resources. And if you're doing an appeal, whether that is the standard time that a lot of folks do in the fall, others like to do it during Epiphany or Lent. Every church is different. Your session gets to choose, but there are great resources for, like even an annual campaign. There are 7 different models here, and you can choose one. And what I love about it is it tells you the strengths and weaknesses, when to use, when not to use. And then it gives you each week what you do to prepare for it. Here's the narrative budget builder I named. And there are resources also on plan giving. So I would say at the very least, do 1 minute for mission on generosity a quarter, one every 3 months, right? Do another minute for mission on plan giving once a quarter. And a lot of our churches, this is actually a neglected area. They don't talk about plan giving. And as a result, I don't know, this happened to me the other day. I can't see your wonderful faces. As a result, when our churches don't talk about planned gifts, we really miss an opportunity for them to do something after their lifetime for the sake of the gospel, to receive that benefit and give them an opportunity to do something that's meaningful. And it's stunning. From Giving USA, we know that 24% of all charitable dollars go to houses of worship. But when it comes to bequests, it's only 8%. And since we're resurrection people and we can't take our stuff with us, and we know that U-Hauls do not follow hearses, what's going on? Churches aren't talking about it. So people aren't even thinking of the opportunity to do something after their lifetime to share the good news of Jesus Christ with future generations. And so just doing planned giving, and at the very basics, we'd say 12-4-2-1. 12 times a year, put a blurb in your bulletin about planned giving. And I come down here and I'm clicking on this resources library. Can you see this, friends?
Got it.
Okay, I'm on page halfway down and I see touch points. There are all different resources here, but I love this touch points because there are little blurbs, quotes about planned giving, facts about planned giving, and even inspirational paragraphs on planned giving. Once a month, take one of these, just one of them, and put it in your bulletin once a month. And then 4 times a year, do a minute for mission on planned giving, on leaving a legacy after your lifetime. So, you know, that's like out of a 3-month period, you've got 2 minute for missions, one on general mission and ministry of the church, one on a planned legacy of the church. The other things we'd recommend with planned giving, we talk about 12-4-2-1. Actually, take that back. 4 times a year, do a newsletter article. Twice a year, do a minute for mission on planned giving. So, you know, I'd say do 4 times a year, a minute for mission on just the story of our church and how your support makes a difference. And then twice a year, once in every 6-month period, do a minute for mission on planned giving. And then once a year, invite me out to preach and do a workshop for you, to encourage folks both in their annual support of the church, but also claiming the privilege of doing something after their lifetime. What I like to say is legacy is not just for the rich or those without children, but all of us, you know, have a capacity to leave a legacy for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And for some of us, it may be deciding, I'm going to endow my pledge 20 times my annual gift. I'll leave a gift of that size after my lifetime. Others, it may be a percentage. Maybe it's the first time in my life I've tithed, but I'm going to tithe my estate, right? Well, the only thing I have is a house worth $100,000, still a $10,000 gift. If the nursing home takes all but the last $100, that $10 is still significant. Others may choose to leave a particular amount or a leftover amount, but the key is being open to discussing that too. And remember, it's not about guilting people into supporting the church, but it's being invitational. We really believe in this. And I think a great thing in worship is, do any of your churches do a formal appeal annually, or no? Okay. For those of you who do a formal annual appeal, think of having the elders stand up and don't present until every elder has made an estimate of giving, right? And you ask them to do it at a personally meaningful level. No one else can tell them what's personally meaningful. They'll discern that themselves. But at least have every elder making an estimate of giving, because then you can say, in worship, we only come before the rest of the congregation, encouraging you to join us in this estimate of giving, because we believe in this ministry and we believe we need to be the first to dedicate that as we invite you in to join us with it. So that's another time during worship, you can say, our elders really believe in what we're doing. Won't you join us in being a part of it? And letting folks know that all size gifts make a difference. And that we really appreciate when people engage themselves deeply, because we know it's changing them, and it's changing us as a church too. The more we're engaging all of it, time, talent, and resource. A couple of resources I'd like to share with you. This is a new book by Carl Travis. It's called God's Gift of Generosity. Tom, you got your copy. Good.
Thank you.
A lot of it is written to the pastor, but it's such a rich text. It's such a wonderful piece that it's great for elders and to be reading as well. You might like to read it together. Let me grab one other off my shelf. Tom, have I given you this one?
No, I don't think so. Not
This
yet.
is Bill Enright's Kitchen Table Giving. You can get it off of Amazon as well. And it's like Carl's book. It's actually a little shorter. It's only 77 pages. But it's called Kitchen Table Giving, Reimagining How Congregations Connect with Their Donors. This is a great read for church elders. And there are even at the end of each chapter, little table talks for personal reflection, group reflection and action, conversation, and then action steps. But it is just a really wonderful tool that I would commend to you as well. You know, if you can buy it yourself, do it. If you have no resources, but you'd really love this book, give me a call. I may have an extra one on my shelf I can send to you. Okay. But really a great resource. And what I love about these is we never want to guilt people into supporting our ministry. Bill also says this, if you guilt people into it, people will give just enough to be satisfied with their guilt. But if they give because they believe in the ministry, that's where you got to tell the story. If they give because they believe in the ministry, and that's when they're going to be giving at personally meaningful levels, and not just to be satisfied with the threshold, but because they want to make an impact in your ministry. Questions, thoughts?
I just want to add, Ellie, in the last church I served, Westminster, here in Evans City, I went through a number of these things that Ellie has already presented. We got online giving through Vanco, thankfully, about a year before the pandemic happened. So when the pandemic started, our online giving was set. And so while folks weren't gathering for worship, they could continue to contribute, and we could automatically, have that up and running. My guess is a number of churches that wanted to go to online very quickly made that a lot of work for the foundation to try to get everybody
I think we
connected.
brought on
Yeah.
1,200 or some odd, over
Yeah.
1,000 in a 2-month period. Mhm.
Right. But that is an important step for the families that say the one check we write a month is to the church, because nowhere else in our lives do we actually write checks anymore. It's a helpful piece. The other piece, and I'll still credit Ellie for this because I worked with her a number of years ago, is the narrative budget piece. And we didn't make the whole worship service like Jamie had mentioned, although that's a great idea. I'm sorry I didn't think about it. But we used to have this really boring annual meeting where people would just go through the annual report and sort of look at the numbers, and from the pews want to then micromanage the treasurer's work, and the office work and that kind of stuff. And we turned that into a lunch. So we left the sanctuary, we went down to our fellowship hall, we had a meal together. We put a stack of the the budgets that had all the numbers
Line
in the
items.
back of the room. And then we told the story through a PowerPoint presentation, through a brochure. And I think I kind of ripped off one from Ellie's when she was in Warren to make kind of a new brochure for Westminster. And we made it at such a size that it was kind of the placemat. So it was right with everybody's seat so they could see it and have it with them and be able to take it with them. And to tell the story of the last year was a way to change that dynamic from this really sort of perfunctory, boring, oh, we got to do the annual meeting, to now we get to talk about the life of the church. I think we were probably working toward annual campaign, having people do things throughout the year, and COVID kind of threw that in a loop, unfortunately. But the one piece I would say is you can't just go in and sort of say, okay, we're going to do this idea and this idea and this idea, but more, how can you implement a number of these ideas slowly over a period of time at a pace that people can begin to accept and understand that you're changing a culture, and that takes time to do. It's, folks aren't going to just do it in the next 2 months. It may take 2 or 3 years, but with little pieces and resources here and there, that movement really can be made. And it does dramatically change the conversation from, let's put the deficit in the, as an announcement in the bulletin every week saying,
I
oh,
was
we're
just thinking about that.
yeah, we're $2,000 behind for the year. Make sure you get your gifts in. To your gifts are vitally important to our ministry, and we want your support, and help us to do this work that God is calling us to because we're really committed to it. And that is just a different way of thinking about resources in the congregation.
And some churches, I can walk into the sanctuary and I see the board for the hymnal, and they'll say, how many people were in church last week and what was collected and what's needed, right? Or they put that in the bulletin. I would urge you not to list how much money was received in a given week, or if you have shortfalls, because it's going to scare off your visitors and your friends. You don't want to do that. And what do we know? Most people give in January and December. And so there are times in the year we might have shortfalls, either because, we had a lot of snow this year, so a lot more snow plowing than we budgeted for, and higher gas bills, or a lot of AC and people were away on vacation in the summertime. But we know, unless you're doing a July to July comparison, that's not helpful. And we don't want to scare people off with inaccurate information, right? But if there is a need, let's talk about ministry yet to be funded. Don't talk shortfalls. The language you use is really important. And just changing those nuances so slightly will make a difference. So if you're experiencing shortfalls, don't ever put it in your bulletin or even your newsletter. If you need to do a communication to members of the church, do it in a formal letter or formal email that's only to members. But don't talk shortfall. Talk about ministry yet to be funded. That encourages folks to bring their gifts in. And Yeah, just don't do it in the life of the worship service because we don't want to scare off members and friends with actually information that seems scarier than it really has to be. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so many wonderful resources with Stewardship Navigator. If it's useful for me to do a Zoom with your session to walk them through it, I'm glad to. Give me a call. If your church isn't offering online giving and you're interested in it, I'll do a demo. There's a church in Redstone Presbytery I support. And so I always use them for my demo. And so you'll see what it looks like from the donor side, and I can answer any questions. The beautiful thing about our online giving program is if you do nothing, the money received sits in a money market account at the foundation to the last business day of the month when it's swiped over to your bank account on file. We do not retain the interest to that money market. When we started with this back in 2013, it was like pennies a quarter. Well, I had an elder come up to me last December. I don't know what the money market is paying today, but last December it had been paying about 2%. And so he said, it's amazing. The money market is almost offsetting really the cost of having the online giving. And you never want to ask folks to pay for that cost, but trust they can read. And if they want to help offset that 2%, they can have a little portion added to it, but don't ever ask it. We really want to live out of an attitude of God's abundance. And we sure enough don't say to folks, can you please pay for your pew envelopes? We never ask that, right? So why would we ask that for the others? So lots of good resources. Know that I'm available to meet with your session. If it would be useful to have me do a culture of generosity and thinking about year-end stewardship, like I have a 3-hour session I can do as a part of a retreat you want to offer with your session, or I can do a 1-hour transforming congregational stewardship. But how do you think about what we're doing year round? And it's really utilizing these resources through Stewardship Navigator to tell your story well. And there's no cost to have me come out. This is our service to the church. So the church, I'm not allowed to take an honorarium. The foundation pays for my mileage. I'm really glad to be of resource to you. And if you want me to preach, I ask that if you have a preacher, they're there that Sunday. But they get a Sunday off where they get, 15 to 20 hours of their life back because they're not writing a sermon. But I'm glad to preach and even do a workshop after church. Usually I do that on planned giving, but if there's another issue that's really pressing, I can do that, meet with your session. But know that I'm available to provide support to you. And it's just about getting on my calendar. So, Tom, is there anything I didn't speak of that you hoped I'd address?
No, I think we're good. We're also at 1:00, and I want to be sensitive to people's time. So thanks for your willingness to be with us. We can get those PowerPoint slides out, and if you didn't get Ellie's contact information or you don't already have it, certainly let us know and we can put you in contact as well.
And it'll be in the slide deck, so I'll send it to you, Tom. Thanks so much.
Good.
I appreciate your time, and blessings go with you as you celebrate your ministries, energize them, and help people catch vision to be a part of them.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.